So Dave, what do you see the key challenges for engineering and manufacturing businesses for the next 18 months?
Well, I think in terms of how we navigate ourselves out of COVID, for me, I think there's two recovery things that we have to really concentrate on. One is how we reintegrate the workforce, and I'll come on to that. And the second one is supply chain volatility. I think in terms of the supply chain volatility side, we've seen it, we've experienced it, whether it was due to COVID restrictions early on, hitting supply chain issues, factories not being up and running. Then we had the chip shortages on electronics causing the problems. We're starting to have the pandemic in recent weeks. That caused some problems here with staff having to self-isolate. So I think that whole bit about supply chain is a really important one. And it's quite difficult if you're a smaller business. We've got a manufacturing, we do the McLaren engines. Some of our components into those McLarens are single sourced. There's just not the economies of scale to go dual source. And that makes it really difficult. So supply chain volatility in the next 18 months as companies come back online, I think is something that's going to have to be managed. Also, supply chain pricing. We're seeing inflation go up. We're seeing pricing go up because of disruptions in supply, and there's limited amounts of componentry around. So people are putting the supply and demand pricing up. You can see that in the building industry if you ever just want to try and buy a piece of wood now, what the price of wood is compared to this time last year. So supply chains, I think, are hugely important, and that's a real challenge for any manufacturing business to manage. The second part is if you're an engineering company or manufacturing, is your team, is your workforce, and how do you reintegrate them back into coming back to work? Now, some manufacturing plants and some of ours have worked all the way through, so there's less of an issue of reintegration. On the engineering side, we've had most of our 3,000 staff working from home over the last 18 months. And as a business, you can survive working remotely and doing this Zoom or Teams, but you can't live. You're not mentoring the young engineers. You're not sparking off each other, generating ideas. You're not creating business development. You're not integrating with customers. You don't breathe as a business. You can function, but you're not living. And it's how you bring those people back on site. Some of the people don't want to be on site. They'd rather enjoy working from their garden. Some people do. And it's how do you bring people back in a safe way, in an encouraging way, and then also get the professional standards back up. And I've seen that over the period of time, over the last 18 months, you just notice it. Working from home is not the same from working from an office. When you come to work, you put a tie on or a collared shirt, you're at work. When you're dealing with people on the phone or whatever, and they're in their pajamas or shorts or whatever, they haven't got the same mindset. So there's reintegration and there's reprofessionalization of that workforce. And I think that's the challenge also over the next 18 months. The other positive challenge is, boy, what a market to be in. There's so much change going on. This is quite an exciting time. So around the ESG agenda, around the environmental agenda particularly, electrification, whether that's transport, power, whether it's ground transport, aerospace, rail, it's just an enormous amount of change that's going to happen. So for manufacturing businesses and engineering businesses, this should be a very, very buoyant recovery if we can get the economics of the country working behind it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dave.